Welcome back to Lunatic Astrology, and today we're going to go diving deeply into this Aquarius blue moon with one of my favorite astrologers, my colleague Spencer Michaud. And I always call him the Deacon's guy because he's totally into looking at the archetypes and the meanings of the 10-degree mark of each sign. So I'm just waiting for him to join us here, and we're going to go into the Aquarian full moon, blue full moon, second Aquarian in very short time. Oh, here he comes. So let me go answer the door. So we're back with Spencer Michaud, my colleague in astrology, who is a Hellenistic astrologer. We were both studying Hellenistic tradition with our teacher, Achuta Baba, at Nightlight Astrology, and I really love his perspective in astrology. He's one of those guys who goes into great storytelling depth, looks at the myths, looks at the stars, but especially also a specialty that I don't have, the 10-degree mark of each sign, the deacons. And I kind of joke decans, but it's like almost kind of like the deacon of a church. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Spencer and say, hey, tell us a bit about yourself if you like, and then let's talk about astrology of this blue Aquarian moon on the 22nd of August.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. I appreciate you having me on the show. Yeah, I'm a professional astrologer from the Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, Michigan area in the US. And I have a YouTube channel, Spencer Michaud Astrology, where I do stuff and talk about the planets and the stars and do readings and things like that. And you and I both went through Achuta's programs, which were amazing, and really appreciate his teaching and the community that we were able to build, meeting other astrologers and getting to do collaborations like this and whatnot. I think we're success stories from his program for sure, being here today. Yeah, and just thinking about this full moon in Aquarius, and going to bring in some Decanic tarot again today to give us some visual images on what we're going to be experiencing over the next week or two here.
Yay. So I have asteroid stuff I'll be bringing up later because of Pandora and Orcus playing along in the sky at the time. But let's start with what you have. Would you be willing to share the screen and show us the diagram of the moon? And we'll go into a collaborative discussion of the power of a very positive moon. Let's start that up for everyone coming in. Jupiter is conjunct this moon in general, even though he's retrograde, having the Lord of goodness, expansion, growth, and luck, dispeller of darkness in some ways, joining this moon. I want to give everyone that heads up. It's not necessarily all good, but it's very positive. So hey, Spencer, what do you think?
Yeah, so it's a second full moon in Aquarius that we were experiencing over the course of the past month. So some similar themes that we were dealing with the last full moon. I think the difference really I see between this full moon and the one before is the last full moon that we had both of the malefic planets present with the lights. So both Mars and Saturn were either in the sign of Leo with Mars and the sun, or in the sign of Aquarius with Saturn and the moon. Now this full moon is a little bit gentler, I would say, because Mars is not co-present with the sun. We still do have Saturn here, but we've got the moon hanging out with Jupiter, as you said, which is a positive thing. I think that one of the challenges of Leo energy versus Aquarius energy, especially with this 10-degree section, this third decan of Leo, is we have the Seven of Swords card here associated with Leo 3, opposed to the moon being in the third decan of Aquarius 3 here and we're seeing a figure that is standing his ground in Leo, and we have a figure that is leaving the past or the encampment behind with Aquarius 3. So I really think that the main thing that we're going to be dealing with at this full moon is, where do we need to stand up for ourselves and maintain our position, and where is it going to behoove us to move forward and to say, you know what, I've done everything that I can do. It's okay for me to not really to give up, but to take the wisdom that I've learned from this situation and to be able to take the leap into that new experience and into the unknown, really. And you and I were talking a little bit earlier today about ambiguity and feeling that the human tendency to feel really uncomfortable with ambiguity. And I think this is a real theme with this full moon, is there are going to be some situations where we don't necessarily have all the answers yet. And we have to live into them by being present in the moment, by reacting to what is presented to us day by day. I think this is one of the things that's been coming up with the transition from the Earth age to the air age that we saw with the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn at the last winter solstice, is we have to be more comfortable with this decentralized type of energy where we're getting in touch with our flexibility rather than having some concrete thing that we move forward towards each day. And that's a really big philosophical shift for humanity in general. I know that we're struggling with that even just as a family. Like, how do we make adjustments and react to what information is presented to us in the moment, which is continuously changing? So I think that's the first thought I had about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I would like to contextualize that too.
Yeah.
So what Spencer was referring to is the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter, the conjunction of Kings, or the Great Conjunction, that kind of initiated the air cycle in earnest. There was a dip in air in Libra in the 80s, but this is the earnest of stepping into a couple hundred years of every 20 years, synodic cycle of those planets, creating a wave of air focus. And I think to contextualize that is to simply say the last time they joined together was in Taurus 20 years ago. So that's very grounded. That's very determined, fixity of, this is what it is, this earth, but, now there's that air problem, that we're now encountering for the first time. And I'm going to kind of laugh at this air problem, but it's not necessarily. It could be more internet, more invention, more innovation, more collaboration, more we, the Aquarian mandate, the we, not me. But also, I remember a couple of years ago, somebody saying in astrology, not a couple, maybe a year ago, that Saturn in air is fear of air. And I wish I could remember which astrologer made that statement. Saturn, anxiety, right? Fear, yeah, sometimes in the sign of air. And we could say that it's fear of the air we breathe, because there's been a pandemic. We can say it's fear of or anxiety about the way technology or society has progressed into disastrous climate change.
Sure.
Things like that. Even mining of Bitcoin, for instance, which is happening, is very it's very electric energy intensive. It requires a huge output of electricity, which causes, of course, stress on the environment, because our electricity is produced, in ways that are environmentally sometimes harmful. So I kind of like that the Jupiter vibe here, even though it's laying down new laws again as it's transgressed back into Aquarius at the 28th day of July, where we realized maybe in our ongoing pandemic, we have to have some new rules put back in place around, say, mask mandates or social distancing. But Jupiter's still being a benefic on that moon. I think he's offering some, for each of us in our lives, some opportunity for where we wish to expand or where we wish to take a positive risk. Like you said, the push-pull between, I think those two cards can be, what do we need to defend, or what do we need to stand for? You know what I mean? Like, there's a vibration of like, where are you walking into, something that you stand for in a positive way, versus what you're like gritting your teeth to defend that may not be worth defending in your own life.
Yeah.
Think about that question.
Well, let me tell you a story that I think really illustrates this energy. So recently, I don't know if you've been following along with the Olympics. Have you watched the Olympics at all over the last few weeks?
I was.
The story of Simone Biles really, to me, is a Jupiter and Aquarius 3 story. And she's an American gymnastics performer who was widely considered the greatest female gymnast of all time, or even maybe the greatest gymnast of all time, period. And she showed up at Tokyo and had a really difficult time with some of her mental health. And she decided to withdraw from that. And there was a lot of criticism. There was a lot of people that were confused about, that action. And I like to think of Jupiter also as a planet that brings us benefit from our own actions. So it is merit based. It's what type of action is going to bring us honor. Whereas maybe Venus is more of a planet that brings us things just from just being who we are, right? Because it's related to that lunar sect, whereas Jupiter is related to the sun and the light of our mind and the ability to choose something. And it was really interesting to me because I think that Simone Biles was honored for her ability to withdraw, to leave competition, not to stay and fight. She had this kind of, she had a condition they call in gymnastics called the twisties, where she was trying to do these very complicated spins in the air and was losing her sense of direction while she was doing it, which can be very dangerous and can, lead to like a broken neck or something of that nature. And I have to admit, I have I have my ascendant in the third decan of Leo.
Oh boy, you can tell us all about it then.
And when I heard this, the first reaction that I had was I was like, oh, she abandoned her teammates. I was upset, But the more I learned, the more that I learned about that condition with the twisties, the more I learned about the healthy boundaries that she was setting with her body, the more I was able to appreciate the action that she took as being worthy of honor and merit. And that by her setting a limit and her setting a boundary, she was doing the action that she thought was in the best interest of her teammates and her whole, and because she knew that she was not able to perform up to her standard. So I really think that could be part of this lunation as well, is learning about if there's a situation where it may really be of benefit to say, you know what, I can't stay and fight this anymore. It really would benefit me to move on into the new situation, or to not stay and defend my position. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. And, when you think about that in terms of the athletes as well, I did watch that whole thing with the gymnastics, but also in Canada, we won the soccer gold. And
Yeah.
I just have to laugh because it was sheer grit and determination in the penalty shootout of the goalie and Team Canada. But at the end of the day, I also think of Jupiter's justice. And,
Sure.
there was this big, really bad fallout with a really bad ref call against Canada when the US beat Canada.
Mhm.
Oh my God, in 2012. And it was a ref call for Canada
Right.
that allowed us to even the score that led to the penalty shootout at the end. And I kind of think of Jupiter as the just one, like wise King Solomon. Let's find fairness. Let's find justice here. I think in
Sure.
our own lives that we'll see that happen in this moon, co-joined with that. But so some ways fairness will prevail in our lives where we felt maybe there was something slighted or unfair or unjust that had occurred. Possibly in the couple of weeks that follow, we'll find sort of divine justice prevailing. But I also note that, this is something I'm not sure how to make sense of really. So I'd invite your consideration. The sun is under the light of fixed star Regulus, the king, born to
Right.
rule. And usually sun on Regulus is about a world leader or somebody in power. And the sun's there every year, so no big deal. But the sun on Regulus this year, in that third decan, in the bound of Mars, makes me wonder if there's going to be something for the collective, mundane astrology wise, where this moon over the 2 weeks that happens, and Jupiter being that justice dude, is going to reveal some kind of, or activate some kind of justice story regarding a leader, a king, someone in governance or power. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that, yeah, Regulus is a really interesting fixed star. It was one of the what they called the watchers of the seasons. So it marked out one of the four fixed positions of the ancient sky that held the cross of matter together. So Regulus being the fixed star in Leo that represented the summer solstice, the height of the sun, the height of power, the height of vitality. Bernadette Brady talks about this fixed star as having a particular nemesis, though. She talks about all of these royal watcher fixed stars or royal fixed stars of Persia as having this thing to watch out for. And with Regulus, it's the pursuit of power at all costs. And, being able to avoid the nemesis of maybe taking revenge on people that you feel may be trying to threaten your sense of sovereignty, power, position. I think one of the interesting things about Regulus in particular, and we're going to see this very shortly after the new moon, is Regulus is actually progressed or
Yes, to zero, it's zero
right.
Virgo. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really curious to see if that really shifts the energy of these royal fixed stars, because we've got Fomalhaut that's progressed into Pisces from originally being in Aquarius. We've got Antares that was originally in the Scorpion and Scorpio that's in Sagittarius, and Aldebaran that was originally the eye of the bull in Taurus that has now precessed, that's the word I'm looking for, into Gemini. So what how does that shift our view of power, right? Being in the first decan of Virgo, maybe it's not necessarily about being divinely gifted with power, but more about earning it through your skill set or through your ability to produce something useful for the world, right? And your ability to refine your craft, like we see in the first decan of Virgo.
Oh my
So
God, I just had an insight.
yeah. What do you got?
Remember Game of Thrones, for us Game of Thrones junkies? Did you watch the show?
I watched a little bit of it. I did not get all the
So,
way through the
so
series. So
it's typical Regulus in
yeah,
Leo, right? It's
yeah.
typical, he who will be king, and the deposing of kings and the fighting among kings. And then the guy we think is going to be the king, the bearded dude, I can't remember his name,
Mm-hmm.
is expected to take over the kingship. But at the very end, there's a twist. And Bran, who isn't a king, in fact, he's a seer, he's a sage, he's a mystic. He always has a crow with him. He's blind. Okay, he takes over and becomes the king. There's this like round table decision to give the mystic, the seer, the sage-like boy man the kingship. But I look at that new iteration of Regulus in zero Aquarius. It's in the bound of Mercury. Mercury is the magician. Mercury is the messenger. Bran in the Game of Thrones literally delivered prophetic messages. So it's literally, yes, it's a new flavor of royalty, of kingship, of leadership. And it was foretold by the author of, well, I don't know if the Game of Thrones book ended that way, if it was license of the producers of the show, or story people, but it ended with a twist where the king was a new kind of king.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and definitely with seeing Regulus now at zero Virgo, it's definitely like I really am seeing that as a shift of how we even think of our leaders, and think of like, we're seeing monarchy literally dissolve in England, right?
Yes.
So they had divine birthright to the throne, and we literally have that family being like, we don't really want this responsibility anymore, and I think that it's one of those things where power should be earned rather than just gifted or distributed. And it really should be based on, are you providing value for your community? I think Virgo in general is a sign that is about establishing value. And I think one of the I don't know, the assumptions people make about Virgo is that they have this critical function around them, which is true. But having 3 Virgo planets, I think that in my own chart, I can see it as more of a discriminatory function in the best sense of the word, because what we're trying to do is store something for the winter, and we have to determine whether the harvest is going to sustain us. And that takes a close examination. Mercury likes to examine things. In Gemini, they want to proliferate options, examine all the different pathways. In Virgo, Mercury's job is really to like pare it down and say, okay, this has a flaw in it, let's discard it, but this is also of value. And that's really the secret key to Virgo, is saying, how do we determine what is going to be a legacy that we're going to pass on? So there's really legacy questions that come up with Virgo.
Well, yeah. And earth questions, because not only is it the harvest, sheaf of wheat in the hand of the Virgo, the Virgin, with the beautiful star Spica, but it also is the place where you end up with that, question about Mama Earth. Really, will the harvest sustain us? Well, not at the current trajectory of the planet.
Yeah.
So, the new kingships and new leaderships have to be taking into account the mandates of the harvest and Virgo and the earth. So I find that just anyone born into the era when Virgo Regulus was happening versus the old people, for instance, instance, Donald Trump is a Regulus on his ascendant in the old school 29 degrees. And probably we're going to see, I mean, just go back to mundane predictions, with justice God himself, Jupiter. I mean, kind of moving in opposition to that Regulus sun with that moon, which is the masses, the people, or outpicturing intangible world over the next 2 weeks. Maybe there'll be an announcement like literally taking the old guard down with the justice system. Maybe all that back end stuff that's been going on behind the scenes where, I don't know, various powers, district attorneys are putting together evidence, or, whatever's been going on. There's so many lawsuits against that man, who knows? But the point being that maybe one of them will be announced over the next 2 weeks. And even Governor Cuomo being deposed from power. He's of the era, born in the era when Regulus was in Leo. That just happened, but we're in the orb of that moon, really. So we should, and Jupiter is in the decan and opposing that sun. So in general, the vibe being like the old guard kind of falling.
Yeah.
It says hopefully.
Well, even think about Governor Cuomo as someone who was bestowed that power by divine birthright too. His dad was governor of New York back in the day. So it was kind of this continuation of this family legacy, much like the throne in Great Britain. So you're right. I think we could see someone in a position of power, maybe that power being redistributed to the people, to the collective. I think that just bringing more thoughts in about the Regulus being in Virgo is, we are going to have to figure out sooner than later, with a sense of urgency. And this is one thing about Virgo that I think people understand too, is that Virgo Mercury is aware of the impending winter. And I think that with the sun in Virgo now, we are starting to get this anxiety, this righteous anxiety, that there is an impending winter, metaphorical winter coming, as far as climate change is concerned. And hopefully that shifts us to a sense of urgency to say what stays and what goes, because we're moving out of that industrial age that defined the Earth age. And we can no longer continue on that same path of huge industrialization and pollution and the rape of Mother Earth, basically, if we want to continue as a species thriving on this earth.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Those 200 years of the synodic cycle of Jupiter and Saturn in Earth did produce the industrial society that we live in. It did create the ramping up of, the idea that the economy growing is the only thing that matters, that we have to keep the growth engine going no matter what, at all costs. Right. And, I think that this shift with this real earnest beginning of the new conjunction in Aquarius, which inaugurates a 20-year cycle in Aquarius of themes of Aquarius prevailing, is going to give us a new way of dealing with what we've already created, this climate catastrophe. And you were going to mention the heliacal rising of Mars in relationship to some of this stuff right now. You want to go into that?
Yeah. So on our chart here, this is a really cool technique that I've been really examining in transit work and in client work. But this is what's called the heliacal setting of Mars. And what we're talking about is the part of the synodic cycle. Synodic cycle is the relationship of a planet to the sun. And, different planets have different types of ways they move with the sun. So for example, Mercury will make 2 conjunctions as it goes forward and retrogrades back. It's got an inferior and superior conjunction. The outer planets, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter, the superior planets in traditional astrology, only make 1 conjunction as they go through an entire cycle. And what we have here is the point where Mars is going to be going underneath the beams of the sun. So within 15 degrees, when a planet gets within 15 degrees of the sun, it literally becomes invisible because the sun's light will block it out. And that's sort of a planet entering the underworld. It's kind of going into its sick bed to be renewed in the furnace of the sun. And it's the ending of a cycle. So we're seeing the ending of a Mars cycle that began on September 2nd, 2019, when Mars and the Sun came together at 9 degrees Virgo. And it's preparing us for a new Mars Cazimi cycle that begins on October the 8th of this year at 15 degrees of Libra. And I will point out that's going to happen in Mars's exile. So it might be a challenging Cazimi. But I would, for those of you, for your personal life and for the collective, look at events that may have started around September 2019 and see if there is some resolution that is beginning to happen, and maybe through conflict too, because Mars cycles really do speak to things that are about severing, separating, things that require you to have courage to deal with. And you may be starting to see either the breakdown of that situation or an ending around it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you, my sister and I have an expression: you can't make this shit up.
Yeah.
The reason is that, in the Babylonian tradition, Mars is the god of plagues. He doesn't actually cause them. He's a representative of the god Nergal, who causes plagues. And back then, of course, the Cazimi was in Virgo, which is about wellness and health, right? Medicine. And it's interesting, too, that when Mars became visible back then, after his Cazimi, he rose against a star that is a malefic in the tradition of Babylon. It's the crow, Corvus. And so there's a sense of impending ick. You know what I mean? Oh my God, he became visible against a malefic, a difficult star. He Cazimi'd, in the sign of health and medicine. And in a lot of ways, I'm hoping that he is going into a sick bed. I love the way you said that, sick bed. I just think he's like going undercover. He's invisible, but he certainly is no longer as powerful in the outer world. He's not able to brandish his sword of plague, let's call it, in the world in a necessarily visible way, which can potentially, despite the world's nail biting about the Delta virus, crash that plague down really quickly for reasons we may not understand, because I'm not going to go fully into all that, but we've seen the variant, Delta variant anyway, crash in the Netherlands and England already. So I'm hopeful for that. I'm hoping that his impotency can be a benefit, for our time of recovering over 2 years from what he may have been symbolically initiating for the world. And the other thing with Mars in general is that, he is a god of fire and heat. And, we've had terrible wildfires and huge climate problems with heat over the last while. And maybe as he sort of goes into his snuggly little sick bed, as you said, puts his covers up and gets his hot water bottle on, that we'll see a little bit of a decline in the short term of the longer term problem with fires and heat as he goes into his Cazimi period with the sun. What do you think?
I hope so. I don't know for sure. Like, I think I'm getting more and more used to saying, I don't know, which I think is really healthy. And I think that as astrologers, a lot of people come to us looking for certainty and looking for us to give them clarity as far as what's going to happen next. And I think that is certainly a possibility. I think your logic makes a lot of sense as far as like the diminishment of Nergal/Mars and his power out in the world. And I hope for humanity's sake that plays out that way. I don't think it's a replacement for still taking the precautions that we need to do the actions that will get us to that point. Especially with Saturn in Aquarius saying, hey, there is, responsibility and sobriety that is necessary to move humanity forward and doing what is necessary for the collective and things like that, right? Like maybe even letting go of some personal impetus to do what will serve the collective. But I think that's a really interesting theory that you put out there about Nergal and potentially it diminishing the power of that. I could definitely see that being the case. I'm curious as to what will be born at the next Mars cycle with it.
Oh my God, you just read my mind. Well, yeah. First of all, unfortunately, Nergal is the Lord of the Earth in the Babylonian calendar since that heliacal rising last fall of 2019, and will be in charge of the Earth for 200 years, also corresponding to the 200-year cycle of Jupiter Saturn initiating the new air signs. But that does portend things like having to contend with heat on the planet, inflammation, heat, hot, which we already know is happening. I find that there's possibly always a silver lining to everything. And because I'm a Pollyanna type,
Sure.
I think that, the very fact that that whole cycle initiated while he was in Virgo gives us a way to find practical, sustainable solutions that last, fixed energy, for his heat that he's applying to Earth for 2 years. The next rising, however, is going to, I believe, I have to double check, but I think it's coming up against Antares.
Well, let's take a look.
Yeah, because that's a war star. And I've
So
been predicting that we'll have an announcement in 22 of a war, unfortunately, in the world, which doesn't surprise anyone.
I would say one thing that I'm kind of is coming into my mind is in America here, we're really debating a lot about infrastructure. There's a huge infrastructure bill that they're trying to pass here that would really speak to transitioning to renewable energy and things of that nature. And that might be part of the Virgo practical solutions that we're trying to bring as well. But here you can see on October the 8th, we've got the Cazimi of Mars at 15 degrees of Libra. Okay, so this is a decan that is associated with sorrow, with maybe broken agreements. Like, unfortunately, the Three of Swords is the card that comes up with this. But it's really about justice, fairness, and I think that there will be conflicts over what is fair and what isn't. And just to push it forward of when we might see, Mars coming out together, we're going to look for when Mars is outside of 15 degrees of the conjunction with the sun. You were talking about Antares.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I was thinking of sidereal conjunction either. But anyway, you go ahead and find it. Yeah, I'm not sure where I remembered someone talking about that a year ago, and I'm like, really? I better double check. So good for you.
Yeah, we've got this right. I think it's
21.
Yeah, where are we at? I think we're.
I do
there.
think
It is right there.
Prediction is third week of November, but depends on where you live in the world to actually spot him.
I do wish our astrological programs would start doing this for us. Like baking in the heliacal risings and settings would be an awesome feature if you're listening Astro Gold. Yeah. I think this is where I'm seeing it right here around November the 23rd of 2021. Mars is going to rise at about 16 degrees of Scorpio in its own domicile. So a strong Mars.
Yes, a very strong Mars.
And we've got the sun that is conjunct the south node in the first decan of Sagittarius. This is sort of also prepping us, I think, for the Venus retrograde at the end of the year. I know we're looking a little bit ahead, but that's going to be an important part.
Slap the sheets on. Is there any, I don't have every star space in my brain. What's sitting at 16 Scorpio? Any fixed stars?
Yes, actually, let me, off the top of my head, there is a fixed star called Zubin el-Shamali or Zubin el-Janubi. It's one of those two. Hold on.
That's pretty good. I give you credit for your brain. Who's got Virgo?
Yeah, so let me see. Okay, yeah, we've got Zubin el-Janubi that's very close to 15 or 16 degrees of Scorpio here. And this is the southern pan in the scale. So this is one that is associated with a volunteer, with someone who makes sacrifices for the collective. The challenge with this one, they called Zubin el-Janubi insufficient price. So there may be sacrifices that are being made that you're not getting benefit or credit for with this. Whereas Zubin el-Shamali was sufficient price, where you've made the sacrifice, you have justice with mercy. This is like harsh justice. So I really actually think that there could be some funky, harsh, I don't know, sense of retribution that comes up in the collective or in our life or something of that nature. Unfortunately, there may be sacrifices that we have to make that don't feel fair. And remember, the fairness was baked into that Cazimi with Mars and the Sun in the second decan of Libra. Mm-hmm. So I think that when we have the heliacal rising of Mars that we see here, this is where we get the visible result of what seed was planted at the conjunction of Mars and the Sun. So there may be something that feels very unfair that we have to use the entire Mars cycle to deal with and to come to terms with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. No, maybe what I was just remembering then was about it being scorpionic. I mean,
Yeah.
we all like Mars to be strong. I mean, I suppose, but still, that just fires him up a little bit more in terms of the fact that he is a god of war, and we can't pretend that he's not a god of war. And I wonder about even like we kind of deviated from the moon, so everyone's sorry about that, but it's okay. It's meant to be.
Yeah.
There's that perfect. Is it perfect trine to the moon? With as he's rising out of the beams, he's going to be like 16 Scorpio to 16 Cancer, the Cancer moon in dignity.
Sure.
That's a very sweet spot. I know the moon's moving quickly and we're just picking a day out of a hat. But the vibe here, I don't know, the vibe of justice and in would you call it in some what the star is about, like it's not really just. How did you phrase it?
The Zubin al Janubi.
Yeah, how did you phrase it?
It's it's this. So
Incorrect.
it's part of a pair of stars, one being the northern version and the other being the southern. And in fixed star interpretation, the northern star is usually more fortunate and the southern one is a little bit more misfortunate. So this is the southern version. So justice that may not be, that may be a little harsher rather than like a little bit more merciful with the northern star, which is Zubin al-Shamali. So I think I've had clients with this position that they've made a lot of sacrifices for a various situation in their life, and they don't feel like they've been given the credit for the sacrifice that they made. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't make the sacrifice, though. So that may be part of this story, is that there may be something that you have to do that you may not see the immediate reward for it. You may have to practice that delayed gratification. And it may be about returning something to the earth, because I think really Mars in Scorpio really is the cutting and severing to remove a body to return to spirit, right? Whereas when we see Mars in Aries, it's about infusing, impetus into, let me rephrase that. It's about separating from the collective to become an individual. Does that make sense? In Aries, that's Mars Aries. But Scorpio Aries is about separating from the body to return to the collective.
With the Scorpion energy being often associated with stealth, spies, surveillance, things that are also secretive and stealthy too, and Mars being a war god, in addition to the sort of feeling of what you said, needing to make reparations or justice that feels harsh or whatever. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. I don't know, my gut is really strong on this. There's some kind of Mars will be visible in a sign associated with secrets, or that which is kind of hidden by its 8th house association. And I'm wondering if there won't be revelations as well coming out of that lead someplace in the world to not a trade war, but an actual war of some significance. Now, we will see what happens. And this is not to say that it's for sure, and all of that, but I don't know. I have a feeling about that. That's all I'm going to say. And yet, it may be what is needed. Like, in other words, it may be a difficult direction that humanity wants to go in, with some kind of actual old-fashioned war again.
Yeah, and I think that with Mars being in Libra, it's exile. What are we being separated from? I think in Libra, we're trying to create peace through social custom, through externalized agreements that we have with one another. And when Mars is Kazimid in that place, there may be a lack of those things. I think the other thing that we could see is people, because of their idealism, we're becoming really polarized with our beliefs. And I think that there could be a belief war that could happen in that regard as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
And where we're really separated from the social graces that held the fabric of society together. And that's scary to me, because a lot of the times a society is based on people agreeing to be benevolent to one another. And when that breaks down, people start to just act really, like in challenging ways that create chaos and things like that.
Oh
So
my God, yeah, now you're really touching on something, right? Because
yeah.
Libra, besides, agreements, pacts, and treaties, and I always
Mhm.
joke that someone has Mars and Libra, they're always like feeling out of place because it's like the guy just got off the battlefield and they're now putting him in the peacekeeping tent with UN
Right.
peacekeepers, and he's like, wait, no, 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 like we don't make peace with these guys, they're barbarians.
Right.
But the Libran mandate might be, let's agree to disagree,
Yeah.
right? Let's agree to
Yeah.
disagree. But
I like that.
Mars in exile in the heart of the sun, where he's going to be reborn, might just come spitting out into Scorpio, really pissed off.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, because of realizing the inequality or realizing the imbalance in something, that definitely could have Mars coming out swinging, you know? So,
Mhm. We shall see, because as we started pre-show here talking about how there's such polarity and such division in the world right now regarding the COVID situation, how it's really gotten uncomfortable and out of hand.
yeah.
And whether it's people not agreeing to disagree or agreeing or not agreeing about whatever is going on in the world at that time, there is definitely this sense that Mars might have a bit of a grudge on his shoulder
Sure.
about what he had to endure in the heart of the sun, with a bunch of peacekeepers. So we'll see if it's like he wants to spit out, a lot of vitriol around a belief war, or if it's a real, or it could be a trade war, or if it's a war, because there's a lot
Mm.
of hot spots on the earth right now that are heating up. And a lot of eyes are on those hot spots, especially in the Middle East. So to be determined for sure. So we deviated from the moon, which is
Mhm.
okay, because we were just going to kind of riff like two musicians on what happened here. We want to finish up soon because I want to honor
Yeah, sure.
both of our time. I think where we've gone has been really fascinating. I'm just going to
Mhm.
add a couple of spicy bits to the.
Yeah, and I got the chart back of the
I
full
love your
moon.
chart. Let's keep your chart
Yeah,
because it doesn't even need to be switched to mine.
sure.
I love that you got the bounds in there. I just want to say co-present with the moon usually has some kind of flavor. It's like the moon itself is like the dish, and the spices that you would put on top or whatever are in it can be what's happening in the sky when the moon is stamping itself onto the full moon,
Mm.
onto our awareness. So I'm kind of intrigued to see that Mars is really tightly in a trine to Uranus. I'm
Mhm.
feeling strongly that combination is exciting versus
Mhm.
difficult. And one of the cool things about it, I'm a UFO junkie, guys, and I've seen two in my life. So unidentified aerial phenomena. I wouldn't be surprised if some of that doesn't pop into the storyline, honestly, that we find, over the next 2 weeks, some disclosure about Uranus, just put Uranus and UFOs in the same bag, or non-ordinary weird stuff, sci-fi stuff, and Mars being, possibly soldiers or military people talking more about it. And there's this kind of a weird dude called David Icke, and he's like basically really far out there. So we won't go into too much about him, but he was born with Uranus Mars conjunct, and he like has all of these weird theories about reality that are extraordinarily eccentric and way out there. So we could say there's a way out there vibe with Mars trining Uranus, and maybe individually it could be just exciting, like being original ideas coming out of that full moon, spitting into your awareness, or down pineal gland downloads that come to you that you want to take bold action on Mars. So that's exciting. I like that trine a lot. I feel like there's something good trying to happen here, and my feeling is that maybe individually we get bold action with inventive projects or insights, but collectively I'm hoping for a UFO disclosure.
Well,
You have any
I think that'd be interesting. I think that also, just to piggyback off of that Mars Uranus trine, I think we could also see efficiency breakthroughs with Mars in Virgo, and especially in the way we deal with our resources as Uranus is in Taurus. I think that there may be positive actions taken to break through the old way of doing something that allows us to utilize our resources in a better fashion. And I'll come back again to saying that we are in the midst of a multiple $1 trillion infrastructure bill in the United States that would dramatically change the way that we deal with our resources, our energy, the distribution of wealth. I think that could be a part of it. I think, there's another trine in this chart too that we didn't even touch on, the Venus Saturn trine,
Saturn,
which I think is
yeah.
interesting as well. And that might bring in some, um, you know, some fairness, some justice, some ability to utilize agreement for the good of the long-term view and vision. Like coming into harmony with actions that will actually help us to move forward into a more enlightened future, where we are, taking into consideration what is required of us in this moment, rather than continuing on to live in the past and what was required of us in that moment.
Yeah, I like that too. It's really, those Venus Saturn combinations in general can have a lot of ways of outpicturing, but it's kind of like so stoic, serious, solid, enduring love, um, or bringing some kind of beauty into being, in this case, justice beauty, it's Libra, or fairness beauty into being through Saturnian means, structure and form.
Right.
Even just looking at what happened with the governor in New York, there's a little bit of that there, feminine justice prevailing over, Saturnian old
Yeah,
guard systems.
totally.
It is a sweet stamp in the sky at the time of this moon. I mean, with Jupiter doing sweet stuff, Venus, another benefic, doing sweet stuff. And Mars is not a nice guy, not necessarily, but he's doing a harmonious, flowing Jupiterian vibe trine to Uranus. I kind of feel like this is going to be one of the better moons of 2021 at the personal level as well. I think we're all not going to be totally losing our shit in the next 2 weeks. It's going to feel like, for some reason, despite the way the world seems to be going, it'll feel better than not better.
I hope so. My only concern is seeing, like you were mentioning, that this wheel has the term rulers or the bound rulers,
Mhm.
and we've got the sun in the terms of Mars,
I
and the
noticed
moon
that.
in the terms of Saturn. So like those are tough teachers. So I don't think it's going to be a super negative experience, but I do think it is going to require consolidation and possibly release rather than expansion, if that makes sense.
Mm.
I do think that is a real theme of this moon is and Lori, I don't know if do you remember the band Tears for Fears? Were you a Tears for
Yes, I
Fears
love
fan?
that then. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of my favorite Tears for Fears songs is called "Break It Down Again." Do you remember this song?
Why don't Can you sing it?
So it says, "Break it down again.
Yes.
No more sleepy dreaming. No more building up. It is time to recede." Right?
Yeah.
So it's really about the beauty. Literally, one of the lines in that song is learning to appreciate the beauty of decay. And that band was really, there was a lot of really amazing progressive political ideas that band was singing about, despite, their very catchy pop melodies. And I really think that may be the moment that we're in as a collective, is recognizing that we've gone to that point of expansion. And it's really, if we're going to get in touch with the Tao and the natural cycles, it really is time to appreciate the letting go process, the decay process, the fermentation process, so that we can create something that will eventually support new growth. And it's like that time when you're composting and you're allowing the soil to refertilize itself through allowing the old forms to die, so that in the next season there will be fertility and fecundity within the soil. If you don't do that, whatever is grown in that soil cannot possibly nourish you. And that's the point that we've gotten to, where when we continue to do unchecked, unlimited growth that late stage capitalism is asking us to do, what we grow will no longer nourish us. In fact, it will poison us and will create even more problems.
Absolutely. And, with Venus and dignity and Saturn and dignity in a trine, this beauty of decay, I love the way you said that. I might call the video something like that. This beauty of
Yeah.
decay being recognized and acknowledged. Because, yes, even though Jupiter is co-present, like conjunct actually the moon, he is still retrograde until October the 18th. And then he pops forward at 22 Aquarius. So, I mean, again, Jupiter is less likely to outpicture, you won the lottery or, you know, amazing external luck when he's retrograde. This is a different Jupiter. It's a more spiritually aware, in-depth vibe, you know, the guru quality of Jupiter for insight within each of us to be available, coming to light, the full moon, right? So in your own life, what wise and knowing and spiritually aware insights are available to you, you know, that can be lit up for you to see and for the collective as well. And yeah, we're having to see, you know, what we've done over 200 years coming to this time of climactic peril. You know, maybe this whole time we're in, these two moons are Aquarian, the blue moon, because we had one last month, you know, after this initiation of Aquarius by Saturn and Jupiter themselves. And here they are together again in Aquarius. So it's almost like a keynote, right? It's almost like you can taste it. I mean, this time he's in Aquarius again, Jupiter's not in Pisces. You can almost taste the flavor of this full moon being almost like the pitch pipe or something for what we're supposed to try to deal with over the next 2 decades.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that with your Beauty of Decay title, that would be most apropos, is that today, as we record this, we were experiencing a Venus-Pluto trine, right? So we've got Venus in the third decan of Virgo, which has to do with what legacy are we going to create and what are we going to return to the earth, you know, showing us that there may be systems that need to be returned to the earth, right? That may be thinking.
Yes, what a gorgeous, what a gorgeous trine that is.
We're tuning into it today. We are embodying that Venus-Pluto energy today as we're speaking about this. And
I love it. I love it. And you swept into a Scorpio rising time. We started at least.
There we go.
So we end on the Scorpio warrior note.
That's right. That's right.
Oh my goodness. Well, that was fun. Thanks,
Yeah.
Spencer. So where people remind us where people can find you if you're still listening, Spencer, your website info and stuff.
Yeah, I have a website, spencermichaud.com, where you can find, you can book a reading with me. You can book tutoring sessions. I love teaching about astrology and helping people to learn about this craft. I have a YouTube channel at Spencer Michaud Astrology, and I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Spencer Michaud. So you can follow me at all those places, and I love interacting with everyone and helping people to come into alignment with divine wisdom.
Wonderful. I'll put links to all of your places in the description box for people. And yay, thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed this. I love you and I can have a lot of disagreement, but we can agree to disagree. And we don't really actually, but you know what I mean. And we're very different people, but I so enjoy the Virgoian vibe that you can offer to my stellium and Aries.
Well, we're opposite risings too. Leo and Aquarius risings are.
We are. Yes, we are.
So we're going to be feeling this full moon for sure.
Oh my God, I know. I've got my Jupiter altar behind me with my Jupiter announcement, and I'm ready to buckle into like this.
Totally.
Thanks, Spencer. I will
see
you outside of this sometime, but thank you for being here today. I so appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Laurie.